So you want to date an autistic person, huh? Well, rule number 1 is don't let them get hangry. Hi guys, my name's Jen, and I was diagnosed later in life with autism and ADHD. So if that seems interesting to you, you can hit that like and subscribe button. HR tells me that to date there have been no reported injuries from people participating in this activity. So, interestingly enough, one of the most common questions I seem to get emailed to me are requests for relationship advice, which, on one hand, I guess you could say that since I've been with my husband for about 22 years at the time I'm making this video. Yeah, 22 years. I guess I have somewhat of a proven track record, but at the same time, I am not a relationship expert. If you want professional advice, I'll link to a few resources in the description box. But if you're okay hearing from a person who just happens to be neurodivergent and in a relationship, I'm happy to share some of my thoughts. And before we get into it, remembering that no two autistics are the same is probably more important in this context than ever. So let's start at the start. And the first thing I'll say is that if you want to date a neurodivergent person, realize you're signing up for someone with special needs. Don't say you're okay pairing with an individual who has special needs while secretly thinking they will change or expecting them not to have special needs. It's like that person that buys a puppy, then gets rid of them after realizing the responsibility that came with it. Not that I'm comparing us to puppies or anything. But is it worth it? Yes, and I'll talk about that later on in this video. So, while we're not all charity cases that people took on to satisfy their parole requirements, you do have to recognize that special needs are a part of the package. That doesn't mean neurodivergents are incapable of change or accountability. It simply means we can't change our brain wiring, which is the very essence of who we are. How you experience us doesn't change the fact that we will always experience the world very differently from everyone else. We might be able to control some of our output, but not our internal experiences. So a few examples of this might be things like being able to leave the room and not yell at someone when they're doing something that assaults our senses, but we can't change the fact that we have those sensory sensitivities to begin with. We can go to a social event with you, but we can't suddenly become socially adept, not feel discomfort, or change the fact that we'll probably feel burned out by it afterward. And there's a cost to all of these sacrifices we make. All those triggers begin to build up pressure, and controlling our actions or masking is like not having a release valve. It's why we need downtime to alleviate some of that pressure, but there's usually some residual left over that culminates over time and ends up in a burnout or a meltdown later on. Which I know a lot of you are curious about. Should I be concerned when my partner's in shutdown or needing alone time? I'm worried they're upset with me. How often does it happen? And how long should I expect it to last? And what can I do for them during these times? And to answer all of those questions means we'll have to spend a little more time here than on the other chapters in this video. But stick around because I'll share more things your neurodivergent partner might wish you knew after this point. So the first thing to acknowledge here is that our need for alone time is categorically different from burnout. So we'll talk about alone time first, then we'll get to shutdowns and burnout. Many of us need alone time on an almost daily basis in order to recharge. It's kind of like upkeep or maintenance. It might occur after a social event or just general exhaustion from the day. Obviously, everyone gets exhausted from the demands of life, but it's more frequent and severe for neurodivergent brains. Things that are easier for others can take 4 times the mental energy for us. Socializing requires constant masking, and sensory input builds up irritability. We have to put extra systems in place to overcome our executive dysfunction that others don't have to do, which is exhausting. We take in twice as many details, and many of us suffer from decision fatigue over the simplest of tasks. Our need for rest isn't self-indulgence. It's necessary to regulate our nervous systems. And as for how long it lasts, I obviously can't speak for anyone else, but for me, it may take an hour or 2. It's kind of like a chunk of time in an otherwise decent day, and I'm usually able to return to my normal activities afterwards. But burnout lasts a lot longer. For me, it usually lasts for a few days to a week, and I can experience it once every 3 to 6 months or so, but the frequency and duration for each individual is going to differ depending on external factors. I happen to live in a pretty supportive environment right now, but even then, it still happens. Because being a neurodivergent person is hard, even in the best of conditions. When I'm in burnout, I have an extreme loss of energy to engage, and I literally struggle to form words. There's no single reason I can pinpoint as to why I'm shutting down because it's a culmination of small, exhausting things that builds up over a period of time that causes my body to go into standby mode. It's not like the sandwich of time in the middle of an otherwise decent day, and I'm not able to return to my normal activities for several days. And burnout can look identical to depression in a lot of ways. So if you're concerned about ongoing shutdowns in your partner, it might be helpful to look at some of the differences. When it's burnout, I can recover and go back to my normal activities after a few days to a week at most. Whereas depression can last for weeks or months, is pervasive, includes persistent loss of interest in things they used to enjoy, and it's not just due to overwhelm. It's not a protective pause like a shutdown or burnout period is. But these are just generalities. You can't put a time limit or frequency on any of this. Please do not go and tell your autistic loved one that their shutdown can only last for 1 week because Jennifer said so.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
If you think you see signs of depression in your partner, I think it's okay to explore the possibility with them as long as you approach it with compassion and not condescension or blame. And finally, you may have been concerned at some points that their need for alone time is about you. If that is something you've experienced, you're not alone. Prior to my diagnosis, my husband used to take it personally when I hid away because he thought it meant I didn't want to spend time with him. And the funny thing is, I don't actually mind him being in the room during these times, as long as he doesn't expect engagement. We have an inside joke that he's kind of like a nobody to me, which sounds like a giant insult, but from an autistic person, it might actually be a huge compliment because it means you don't drain their energy. So if you need clarification, it's okay to ask, but if they tell you it isn't about you, you should take them at their word and not badger them about it. But in order for that to work, both partners have to say what they mean. My husband shouldn't have to pry or drag my true feelings out through clenched teeth. Sometimes we all want to spare feelings or we need processing time, but if I hold back on my feelings, I can't then go and hold it against him for not knowing what's going on in my head. I usually try to muster up enough energy to tell my husband it's not about him, which is helpful for both of us. Saying out loud like that reminds me that it's temporary and that I just need to be kind to myself while I go through it. And for him, it removes ambiguity and provides reassurance. It can also help him identify and help out with my needs much more easily, which brings us to what you can do for your partner during these times. And my unsolicited advice is to simply ask. Sometimes you might have to do a little bit more of the heavy lifting. Like, I'm probably not going to be able to cook during some periods of burnout because my brain basically stops working. It's like static on a TV up there. So we might have to get takeout. But the biggest thing I ever ask him for is patience and understanding. I've actually asked him not to get mad at me during these times, not because he does, or I actually think he would, but because of my own feelings of guilt and inadequacy. And I think that says a lot about how bad it feels to be affected by autism in this way sometimes. And it might seem like it's helpful to ask what caused it, but that could do more harm than good because there's usually no single cause and there's no fix aside from time. Asking what caused it can unintentionally put the onus and guilt on our shoulders to fix it, even if you don't mean for it to. For us, it's not usually an excuse to be lazy. Part of what makes burnout so bad is that I want to be productive. So being paralyzed by shutdown makes me feel worthless. Believe it or not, most of us don't like being unproductive. So the absolute best thing you can do for your partner is to just give them time and let them know you're there for them if they need anything, and to do your best not to make them feel guilty or to place blame on them. All right, so now let's move on to some additional things your ND partner might wish you knew. There will be things that we can experience that may not make sense to you because you don't experience them, starting with sensory sensitivities to lights, sounds, or smells. In one of my first videos, I shared a story about how my daughter wearing perfume caused a few arguments between us because I'd be trapped in the car with it while I took her to school. While we can both laugh about it now, back then it probably looked like I was being overly sensitive or picking a fight about a non-issue. It's easy to think someone is being theatrical about something that doesn't bother you, but none of us make a conscious decision to be distressed by lights, sounds, and smells. We just are. And the best comparison I can make is to think about how people have treated you about a food you find disgusting. Just because other people like it doesn't mean you experience that food the same way. But yet they tell you it's good, you just haven't had it the right way. Or don't be so dramatic about it and just eat it, it's not that bad. But it's not like you woke up one day and intentionally chose not to like it. And that's how we are with our sensory sensitivities. We didn't choose the sensory sensitive life. The sensory sensitive life chose us. Another thing that may not make sense to you because you don't experience it is the strange quirks or rituals we might engage in to help us feel regulated, because many of us are able to move on or transition if something isn't done a certain way. And I'll give you a quick little example of something like this from my own life. Whenever we buy groceries, I like to bring the bag holding all of our reusable bags inside so I can put the bags back in it as I put the groceries away, rather than just taking the empty bags back out to the car. Does doing it that way make sense? Not really, and even I acknowledge that. Matter of fact, it's an extra step because I'm hauling all of our reusable bags that we own back and forth. But this weird little thing helps me to feel less overwhelmed while there are so many groceries to put away because I feel out of control and disorganized in that moment. And you know what? My husband doesn't berate me about it or demand I do it the more efficient way. Rather, we both just acknowledge it doesn't make sense, but it makes me feel better. So, if your partner needs to rearrange items you just set down or can't eat unless they have a particular plate, try to have patience with them, especially if it doesn't hurt you or require any additional work from you. It might be annoying, but there's a difference between something being annoying and something that is harming you or breaking your boundaries. Sure, it seems illogical and pointless to you, but it might be necessary to their internal regulation. But what about the times when our habits and quirks do have an impact on others? Take, for example, the fact that I can't usually leave the house or go to bed until I've tidied up first. This can make us late to things or cause my husband to not get enough rest if I'm tidying up instead of coming to bed. But this action isn't me trying to be difficult or obstinate. It's how I regulate my environment. Since overwhelm is baseline for many of us, controlling our routines and surroundings is one of the few ways we have to alleviate some of that overwhelm. If I had to describe what it feels like, I sometimes feel tethered to things by a chain, and I can't break free from it until it's complete. Sure, I could physically force myself to come to bed or leave the house without tidying up first, but you know what will happen? My mind won't be able to let it go, so I may not be able to be mentally present at whatever our destination is, or I won't be able to get to sleep. And all of these things I just described are literally textbook examples of diagnostic criteria for autism, stemming from an inflexible adherence to routines, ritualized patterns of behavior, and rigid thinking patterns. This is what autism is, and it's who your partner is. There might be a lot of things we need for internal regulation that may never make sense to you, and it doesn't have to. But you can still choose to be kind to your partner about it. Now, personally, whenever I know my habits are going to have an impact on others, I try to critically evaluate where I can and can't be flexible. Some people might call these their non-negotiables, but I'm not a huge fan of that word in this context because it implies ultimatums and rules out the possibility of compromise. But sometimes we can have needs that will cause too much distress and dysregulation to suppress. So yeah, I try to be flexible on as much as I can be, which I feel reinforces the genuine nature of things I have less flexibility on. But again, our flexibility and compromises comes with a cost. It's that pressure buildup I talked about earlier that accumulates differently for us than it does for neurotypicals. We all sacrifice things with compromises. It's just more of a nervous system issue for us. So rather than criticize me, my husband jumps in to help, especially if it's necessary to get someplace on time because he knows how important it is to me. Your autistic person might have food sensitivities. That means you either have to eat the same things over and over again or plan 2 menus and do extra cooking. Or maybe they need the TV volume or thermostat set a certain way that's inconvenient or really uncomfortable for you. And unfortunately, I don't have any magical advice or a one-size-fits-all solution here, because every one of us is going to have conflicting needs from time to time. These examples I gave could easily cause tension between neurotypicals as well. I mean, what couple hasn't fought over the thermostat before? All I can really tell you is that these things are likely more exaggerated for us. Our sensory sensitivities and inflexibility means that small stuff like this impacts us a lot more, so it might require a bit more effort and patience from the non-autistic partner. Now let's talk about the fact that because we think differently, we communicate differently, both verbally and non-verbally. Verbally, our communication style might feel cold and rigid due to the fact that many of us are more logical and less emotional. You might tell us something makes you upset, and we go and respond with a cost breakdown and logistical analysis in our explanation as to why we didn't do it. In that moment, it totally seems like we sidestepped your feelings and don't give a crap about them, but we do. And although it might feel like you're talking to a robot at times, we also feel a lot of emotions as well, rather intensely as a matter of fact. It might seem like we're being argumentative sometimes when we think we're just being factual. The problem is that we just analyze things very differently. So if you want us to see your side about something, we might understand logistics better than emotional appeals. If you can let the message sink in that this is just how our brains work, and not that we don't love you or care about how you feel, it might help lessen some of those feelings of resentment and anger. And non-verbally, know that our body language and facial expressions may not always match up, because if we feel comfortable around you, we'll likely try to reserve some of our precious energy by not masking around you as much, which is a good thing. But it means you might find yourself trying to decipher our mood more often. Since neurotypicals are trained to read body language and the resting state of neurodivergence might be a flat affect, it can seem like we're in a bad mood when we're not. So if I tell you I'm in a good mood, you're just going to have to take me at my word, even if my face does look like I'm about to kick a puppy. The way we show love might look different too, because we may not always show it in conventional ways that you recognize, like in our tone or with physical expressions. We may do it instead through acts of service, shared activities, deep conversation, or through all those small sacrifices we make that rarely get noticed. Things like masking our discomfort in a social setting, letting go of our routine for an activity you want to do, sharing space in a sensory straining environment, or, spending money on social events or new decor that doesn't make sense to us, because we know it's meaningful to you. These could be sacrifices a neurotypical partner would make too, but for the 16th time, the amount of sensory overwhelm, cognitive effort, and discomfort neurodivergents have to overcome isn't the same. It's a lot of hidden effort that you just don't really see. If you notice your autistic partner making sacrifices like this, acknowledging it might be really encouraging to them, because most of the time, we just bear these burdens internally and they go unnoticed. And recognizing when they're showing love in their own way can help you to not add as many tallies into the "he loves me not" category.
He loves me not.
Many of us have executive functioning issues, so I appreciate it when my husband helps me with structure and accountability, but this means he works with me, not that he bosses me around. And sometimes I really appreciate it when he just makes decisions for me so that I can reduce my decision fatigue. But our struggle in this area can make us forget stuff, not be able to clean, or miss appointments. If you're concerned we're being lazy and using neurodiversity as an excuse, I would encourage you to zoom out and ask yourself some questions. Do you see us really trying, sometimes beating ourselves up for our mistakes, trying to do what we can when we have the energy, and taking accountability on certain things? If yes, then there's your answer. Not that it's anyone's job to be the judge of that really, but hopefully it adds context to the fact that many of us really are fighting executive challenges at times. And in those cases, you can choose to offer help rather than to condemn. Don't expect us to read your mind or know what you want. Obviously, this is good advice for any couple, but even more so here because we often need explicit communication. This isn't as romantic or carefree as the movies say love should be, but it's the reality of dating an autistic person. But it's an illusion to think your partner's love is measured by their ability to know what you want or how you feel without you having to communicate it to them for anyone. Now, as a woman and someone who also has ADHD, I will say that I personally can read body language probably a little bit better, so I might be more attuned to my partner's needs, but I included this in here even though I don't struggle with it as much because it is pretty common for the majority of autistics. All right, I've got 2 more quick thoughts, then we'll move on to the benefits of dating a neurodivergent person. And number 1 is special interests. Let us engage in them and talk about them. One of the biggest ways I feel connection to my partner is when he engages in my special interests with me by asking follow-up questions or doing something to help me with them. If you want brownie points with your autistic loved ones, this is one of the biggest ways to get them for a lot of us. Why do I always say that? Where does the term brownie points even come from? And second is that many of us need more processing time to form a response. As a neurotypical, you might be used to quick back and forth conversation, but due to our need for processing time, you may need to adjust your expectations. We're taking in a lot of details, so we need more time to sift through all of them, and sometimes conversations can happen in overwhelming environments that add to this. And due to our social struggles, we may be more likely to be conflict avoidant or to freeze during difficult conversations. My husband used to think my shutting down during conversations meant I wasn't interested or that I didn't care about what he was saying. I think my diagnosis was a game changer for him in this area because now he knows that's not the issue. You may need to be open to other communication channels as well. Sometimes it's helpful for me to just write my husband a text message to get my thoughts out, which could easily be seen as impersonal. But for neurodivergence, it's just an accommodation. So those are just some of the challenges that come with dating a neurodivergent, and obviously it's not an exhaustive list, but after all of that, you might be left wondering if it's even worth it. And I can assure you that dating a neurodivergent person can be very rewarding. We're actually kind of awesome. Because many of us are playful and youthful in a way that most neurotypicals suppress due to societal stigma. Like the time I talked my husband into taking a random scooter ride downtown on a whim. He didn't want to do it at first, but later on that night he told me he had a great time and that I keep him young. NTs have moments of spontaneous fun and playfulness too, but for neurodivergence, it's more of a personality. We might sing with pure joy, use silly voices and sound effects, or sprinkle our favorite movie quotes into conversations. Some of us still enjoy things like playgrounds and trampolines well into adulthood. You might find us dancing around the house or playfully skipping and spinning because regular walking is boring. And most of us have an awesome sense of humor, even if it is sometimes delivered with a flat affect. Our intelligent sense of humor and inside jokes can come at the most unexpected of times, and a lot of us have silly imaginations too. Just the other day, I saw a random bug crawling on the windshield of our car, and I began talking out loud for it like I was casting him in a film.
What is this invisible force field beneath me? I must leave this realm.
We find joy in small things like sparkly objects, fidget toys, or even bubble wrap. And I just made us sound like a bunch of cats, but there are some theories out there. But seriously, while the rest of the world is too cool for school, many of us are unashamed to get excited about rainbows or rocks or really cool bugs. We can be hard workers and dedicated individuals. And for those of us who have both autism and ADHD, we might be highly organized and responsible in some areas like fiscal responsibility, predictability, child rearing, and other obligations. Many of us are dependable and honor our commitments, sometimes at the cost of our own well-being, but we can also have a creative and innovative side. So we might be entrepreneurs or write you a heartfelt poem. And a lot of us feel a sense of loyalty that stays intact regardless of societal whims and changing circumstances. Our honesty and directness means you'll usually get less mind games or hidden agendas and more straightforward communication. Our preference for deep conversation can create an emotionally rich and intellectually engaging bond. And because we elevate authenticity over appearances, we're probably going to value our partners for who they really are and not their social standing or any other superficial reasons. We have a strong sense of fairness and are more likely to stick to our own moral codes in ways that aren't influenced by social reputation. And our enthusiasm for our passions and expertise can sometimes be contagious. Due to our neurodivergent thinking, we might just be able to help you see the world a little bit differently too, in a beautiful way that can truly enrich your life. So it goes without saying that this is a two-way street, and it's not all on the neurotypical shoulders. As neurodivergents, we can do less draining things that we're actually good at to be a good team player too. Expecting a life without hardships is a fast track to misery and depression, and our relationships are no exception. We should anticipate hard work and compromise as a normal part of any relationship, but it's not supposed to be only hard work either. And if it is, it might be time to reconsider things. But all in all, the best any neurotypical partner can probably really do is to try to understand the base traits of autism and ADHD. Then have some open communication with your partner about which ones affect them and in what ways. And to have an abundance of patience, willingness to learn, and seeking to understand. So I'll wrap it up there, but before I go, I want to share one little final message with you that I thought was the perfect summary to this entire video. I happened to stumble upon a TikTok while I was working on this script that went a little like this. There's an old Turkish saying that when you truly love someone, you love them twice. The first time is quick. It's the easy part. It's the initial attraction, the new stories, and finding out about each other for the first time. It's the butterflies, excitement, and lust. It's two people being the best version of themselves around each other that's easy to love. And the second time is when our partners show us who they really are. The mask slips and they begin to show you their uglier sides. It's the anxiety, the annoying habits, and the mundane. It's hearing stories we've already heard 100 times, sickness, and having to manage life together. If you choose to be with a neurodivergent person, think about if you're willing to love them a second time. They might be attractive, fun, and feel like a breath of fresh air at first because of how different from everyone else we are. But after a while, when we let our mask down around you, you might find it hard at times to walk beside us as we constantly navigate life, fighting an uphill battle. But for the right person, it can be totally worth it. So what about you? As a neurodivergent, what things would you have added to this list? Or if you're neurotypical, what questions would you possibly have for other neurodivergents out there? Let's start a discussion and support one another in the comments section down below. And remember, above anything else, don't let us get hangry. Brownie points, brownie points, brownie points. The origin of the term brownie points is debated, with the most credible theories linking it to the slang term brown noser or to the George R. Brown system of employee demerits. Other theories say it might come from brownie vouchers or magazine delivery boys in the 1930s, or the points used to buy food during wartime rationing. Okay, so no one actually knows what that means. Got it.